My name is Kasper, and I work for Friese, and I'm going to say a little bit about Friese in a little minute, in 2 minutes. I work as the director or CEO of Friese, and Catherine is responsible of like the self-help department. First of all, I'm just going to give you a little, like my Austrian colleague, little facts about Denmark. It's a small country. About like 5 million, 0.6 inhabitants. When I looked it up, it was like it was a monarchy, and the head of state is Queen Margaret. Well, I think the head of state is like
very important.
Is our prime minister. Right now we have a social democrat and social liberal government, and we actually like just in UK we have elections coming up, and it's very exciting. Well, okay. Friese is a umbrella organization. It's a membership organization, independent, in the civic society, who's actually working with volunteer centers and self-help group in Denmark. We have been around for 10 years, and our work links with like policy, research, innovation, good practice, in like involvement of volunteers. Normally we say our vision is to make it easy to volunteer and easy to find a suitable place where you can get help and support. So we link like the volunteer centers and the self-help support is like two pillars of our organization. We are funded by government, the national government, but most of our funding, let's say about 90%, is directly linked to the cost of the volunteer centers. So self-help is a little bit like the little sister in our organization. Due to the fact that the volunteer center, there's a national policy, there's a national strategy, and within the last 5 years, we've been setting up volunteer centers all over Denmark. So like we have had like properly supporting and promoting self-help groups in Denmark for the last 5 to maybe 10 years. So it's very exciting to be here and to listen to all our European colleagues to get some inspiration to set up a national policy, a national strategy, because that's what needs to be done in Denmark. Just what we do, we support, we do network, we do education, we do documentation, we do promoting, we do like talking with politicians, etc., like a normal national NGO. We have 80 members, and I think 65 of them are volunteer centers. Then we have 15 independent self-help organizations, and altogether we have 46 identities who's playing a role in setting up self-help and support groups in Denmark on a local level. And this is not linked, as we just heard about Austria, to the Minister of Health Department. This is civic society. This is like houses where people go if you have a need. You need a place to get some kind of support. There will be a staff member who will try to find a suitable group for you. And if there's no suitable group, they'll set a group up, or maybe talk to the self-help support group in the municipality next to you and try to find a suitable offer. So there's a bit more different approach in Denmark than we just heard about Austria. We just did a very tiny survey, and we right now 2014, like late 2014, we have 500 active self-help and support groups in Denmark in our context, because in our context we do not count all the self-help and support groups that we find in patients organizations like the Cancer Society, Heart Society. So there's a lot of self-help groups going on, and this is not coordinated. What is coordinated is our approach, and what we coordinate is like self-help in a more general perspective. Do you know what I mean? Where people come and find an offer that's suitable to them, not specific, like cancer and stuff like that. This is just like an overview of Denmark, where our members are doing self-help support. If you look at our members, it's especially people who've been working with self-help for a long time, and a lot of you have. We can see like our members are being established like in different periods of time. And if you look here, you have like a third of all of our members are being established in the 80s, in the late 80s or maybe early 90s. Then again, we have a large group, a third, who has been established within the last 5 years. And it's quite interesting because like the old ones, about the 15 independent self-help organizations in Denmark, are all established in the late 80s and in the early 90s.
What kind of they are? Can you tell?
Yeah, and yeah, I can.
Yes.
And if we look at budget, if you look at size, if you look at activities, it's the old self-help centers that have all the activity in Denmark. They are responsible for about 50% of all activities. The budget is like maybe 5 times higher than a new self-help group that are working in the framework of our volunteer centers. They have staff, maybe 2, 3, 4 staff. So we have like this kind of divided picture. We have the old independent self-help movement, and we have the new self-help framework within the volunteer centers. And they are all a part of our NGO, but they're so different. And like you saw on the budget side, we have some local self-help organizations that are very large, a very large budget. But like the self-help organization in average has a budget around to see 15,000 and 30,000 euro. So what we see in Denmark is that there's a high correlation between like activity with the age. Like when was this organization funded? When was it established? And we see that the old self-help centers are doing quite well, while we see the younger ones are struggling to find funding. Like our members have like 12 group in average, but the large self-help centers maybe have 100 groups, and the smaller one have 2, 3, 4, 5 groups. So it's a very divided picture right now in Denmark, and it's challenging us as a NGO who's trying to promote self-help, that we have this great kind of variety. We have some really small places, and we have some old places doing really well. So right now we are in some kind of transition phase. We have begun the work of talking with politicians to set up a national strategy, and we are looking forward to get a lot of inspiration here, because we really see that our members are struggling to find funding, and they're struggling so hard that we see a lot of self-help organizations are actually closing because they cannot find the needed funding. And we see that due to the lack of funding, we have huge difficulties in finding the qualified staff. And if we get qualified staff, they only stay for 6-12 months because the local centers cannot afford to give them a proper job. It's only part-time. So we are in a kind of a fragile stage of self-help in Denmark. So what are we doing now? As I said, we are starting to begun the work to set up a strategy. but one of the ways that we actually are surviving right now is combining self-help group with more like a conceptualized design way of I start again. I stick with my PowerPoint. Sometimes this doesn't work anymore. It's off. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't work. But it doesn't really matter because you can just look at the picture here, how we are doing, or how we're going. Well, yeah. So the overall view is that we're struggling. But then again, there are some kind of lights. There are some possibilities. We said like trends and changes, but also like this window of possibilities in Denmark showing for us right now. Due to the fact that like all over Europe, we see that the welfare states are changing. So right now we are in a different political and economical regime, where like the big society approach in UK are actually also an approach in Denmark, that people are urging civic society to take more responsibility. We see a decline of the public support, and of course we have to try to figure out how can self-help and support group become a part of a solution. And when I talk about solution, this is our environment. People are talking about civic society has to become a part of a solution. So we actually see that there's a tendency, especially with the big old self-help centers that I talked about before, are getting more professionalized. There's a shift from the classical self-help approach to a more conceptualized approach, where you combine specific knowledge. For example, the people who are suffering with ADHD or former drug addicts. So combining self-help and support groups with a specific target group. And that's where the funding is in our country. The funding is that you have to combine, you have to find a target group, and then provide some kind of a solution, some kind of offer. So we see a lot of our members actually are working with doing groups with kids which parents have been divorced, and they can get like local funding to do that. We also like I can imagine a lot of countries are experiencing. It's become more and more urgent that we can actually deliver some kind of documentation. It's getting more difficult to get funding without having a paper where you can actually show how this is how self-help is working. We always say it works, and the people who work with self-help know it's working, but we are in a climate, especially in Denmark, where we have to show it, like with like scientific studies. And this like wave of doing things more professional with documentation, maybe also it's calling for like common standards. So we are things are getting so professionalized, the way we're talking about self-help, that we are in discussion in Denmark that what will happen with the classical approach to self-help if we are following that direction. Because like the new self-help, or I don't know if you even are calling this self-help, we're going to talk about men and self-help later tonight, where we can like present a project that are different than the classical approach. Because like what we see now, that new ways of talking about self-help in Denmark is easier to get funds. The classical way is very is struggling big time. Yeah, I think. I have a definition. I don't want to just, it's in the paper. So, and there's a session later on where we're going to talk about definitions, so we'll leave that there. Then there is a text in Danish, and it says like, this is my right not to answer your questions. But then again, you can try to give us questions.
Thank you. So we have a few minutes for some questions.
I'm asking, how are the other NGOs? Do they have own funding? These big handicap and this, and how is the relationship to those?
They have we all have different income streams. It's like the Austrian example, like you have the handicap organizations. In Denmark, we have a really, really strong handicap organizations. And if they want to do self-help for support groups, they'll find funding within their own environment. The Cancer Society in Denmark is maybe the richest NGO. They do a lot of support groups, but they get their own funding. They get a lot of people, private funding. So I don't know if it's answering your questions.
Yes.
Yeah. We don't have a trust or a fund called self-help that you can apply to.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. And self-help is it's more like funded on a local level than on a national level. So our members are getting more local funding than national funding.
Kasper, I would like a comment from you. You said that there is a trend right now that the new self-help groups should combine experiential knowledge and professional knowledge. I would like a comment regarding the situation in Denmark. Do you see any dangers in this? What I'm saying, the danger of the professional knowledge to occupy experiential knowledge, or is not a problem?
I need to, what?
Okay, let me rephrase the question. You said that there is a trend that new self-help groups should not only be based on experiential knowledge of their members, but they should also combine professional knowledge.
Yeah.
How do you see this?
Well, as I said, like, for example, is it HD? Is that a familiar? Yeah. Like there's a society working on a national level with that kind of disease. We are actually doing a partner project with them, getting national money, where they're delivering the knowledge about what is it to be a kid with ADHD or an adult. And we deliver the knowledge about how are we setting up groups, what's necessary, what kind of education, the facilitator, what is he doing, or etc. So we're just combining the knowledge from the patient organization with like the knowledge and the experience, the practical experience from our self-help groups. And it works really well, and we get excellent results, and it's just easier to get funding that way. And also, like, we are in a climate that, I don't know, in Denmark, you don't get funding without being a kind of a partnership. We need to have a partnership. So the more partners you get, it's easier to get funding. So we just, following the money, and it's a challenge.
Thank you.
I have the right to stop any more questions because but if someone has a comment, a short comment,
Yes, I only want to underline one dilemma which you mentioned. You said that in Denmark nowadays, like in many of our countries, we are asked for evidence. Are there studies? That kind of, is it effective? We pay for effects. And yes, if we have studies and research is important, we should improve or go on with supporting researchers. But on the other hand, I think we have to make clear that self-help groups are not a kind of health technology. do this, like giving you certain medication, or like, you know, or diagnostic X-ray things or whatever. It is something different. It has an element of a health technology, but you cannot do double-blind studies or things like that. So here we are really in a dilemma. In a certain degree, we have to adjust to these general streams, and on the other hand, we have to make a clear cut. Like at Madara yesterday, when you could not be here, he talked about democracy. He talked about storytelling. I mean, who pays for storytelling? But that's a kind of tradition that we have to defend without becoming orthodox.
Just one comment on that. Like, we have discussion. The old self-help centers are actually, you know, promoting, have this view that when we're talking about documentation and effect, well, you don't have to actually grow in the self-help groups. Like when you're talking about effect, you're talking about positive change. And you cannot measure positive change, because if you're in a sorrow, you don't have to, you know, deliver positive change from time to time. You know, maybe it takes longer time. So this is the kind of looking for positive change. Some of our older members are actually approaching to that, because the self-help group is a neutral place where you can actually just be as the person that you are, and I don't know, is that probably explained? It's Katrina who's the expert, so if I do something wrong, so
It's my fault.
it's her fault. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.